They came from a death world, where gravity crushes, bones and storms rip apart the sky. But when the planet of light cried out, they didn't bring war. They brought survival. In just 6 hours, they turned the tide against an enemy 3 times their number. They dove into a sun. They moved through zero gravity like living myths. And what they left behind was something no empire could destroy, a legacy among the stars. Subscribe to Cosmic Hypothesis for untold legends from the universe. Because sometimes those we call monsters are the ones who guard the light. Lytheria, the planet of light, nestled between 2 spiraling arms of the Helios constellation. Lytheria had long been known among the ancient starfaring species by a single reverent title, the living heart of the galaxy. While other civilizations pursued war, commerce, or exploration, the Velorith, only species inhabiting Lytheria, had chosen an entirely different path. They built no armies, developed no weapons, cared nothing for borders or conquest. For millennia, they dedicated themselves to mastering one single pursuit, the art of healing. In crystalline towers that pierced the silver cloud layers of Lytheria's sky, billions of biological specimens were stored. From the acidic bacteria of the desert world, Scorus, to the immortal cellular matrices of Antari spacefish, every living sample was digitized, studied, and preserved within an immense data vault known only as the Flame of Hope. At its center stood one being, or more accurately, one presency named Vallis, a matured Velari, her form slender as a ray of moonlight, with skin nearly translucent and a heart that pulsed slowly to the rhythm of purified bioenergy. Era was not merely the chief healer of her people. She was a living symbol of all Lytheria embodied: wisdom, compassion, and a light that never faded. That afternoon, however, Lytheria's atmosphere was not as tranquil as usual. Luminous clouds drifted erratically above, as if some unseen force was slicing through the sky. Energy sensors at Observation Station 3 began detecting low-frequency anomalies patterns that had previously only emerged during the collapse of a red dwarf star in the Sigma system. Chief Healer, a young Velari named Aesol, called through the internal communication stream. I believe something is approaching, but it's not a meteor. It's a ship. Era lifted her gaze from the softly glowing biopanel she had been studying. A ship? Who would arrive without transmitting diplomatic credentials? Aesol hesitated. The data stream flickered along the crystal walls, trembling as if the very structure itself was afraid. And then a name emerged: Khelar Swarm. A phrase that even the Velaribians who had never known war had heard, whispered in ancient data threads. A shadow that drifted between stars, stripping planets of their names and their life. A fleet without a homeland, without language, leaving only ash in its wake. Era stood in silence. Where are they now? They've just entered the outer perimeter of Lytheria's system. 93 vessels, no response to any hailing frequencies. A deathly hush swept through the coordination center. In that moment, Era felt something no Velari had ever been forced to confront: the terror of extinction. With no other options, she commanded the activation of the ancient plasma signala, nearly forgotten transmission technology designed to propagate across neutron threads, dating back to the age before the Galactic Council's founding. It was slow, it was unstable, but it was the only method that humans had once responded to. She placed her hand on the control sphere. Light from her body reflected across thousands of crystalline data conduits surrounding her. Her voice rose, resonating in hundreds of tongues. This is Chief Healer Vallis, reaching out to any civilization that still remembers compassion. We are Velari. We have no weapons. We have no armies. But we hold knowledge that has saved millions of lives on planets even the Galactic Council had forsaken. We beg not for ourselves, but for all we have preserved. The Khelar Swarm approaches. They do not answer. They will destroy everything. If anyone hears this, please come. Even one person, even a single thread of hope. The signal was launched. Era closed her eyes and waited. Far beyond the edge of known space, the vessels of the swarm drifted into the Lytherian system like spectral leviathans. No colors, no signal lights. These were raiders that required no name-only total consumption. They drained resources, erased life, and moved on. At the control tower, the Valari stood in silence, side by side. Their hands touched, their energies merging into one luminous field of ritual more ancient than stars. No words were spoken. No tears were shed. They simply waited for the end. But across the galaxy, at a small outpost clinging to the edge of a forgotten system, a man was watching the monitors. Gaia Outpost 9 was hardly the most important station in human space. Tucked into the shadow of a gas giant, it was little more than a listening post with failing solar panels and an overworked crew. Yet on that day, one of its consoles flickered with an unusual pulse. The operator frowned, sipping cold coffee as he leaned in. It wasn't a normal signal, not a council beacon, not a pirate burst. It pulsed in long waves, ancient and raw, as if carved from the bones of a dying star. He adjusted the receiver, and then he heard it. We beg not for ourselves, but for all we have preserved. Even one person, even a single thread of hope. He froze. This wasn't just a distress call. It was a plea. Somewhere out there, something sacred was about to be lost, and someone had to decide whether that would happen in silence or with resistance. And so, across the vast night, a single human warship began to stir from its orbit. The stars did not blink. The darkness remained vast. But something had changed. Lytheria had called, and the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, heard. Gaia Outpost 9. Just a coincidence? Gaia Outpost 9 was situated at the very edge of a region ominously named the Rift's Mouth, a remote sector of the galaxy where the light from the farthest stars took decades to arrive. Once an astronomy observation station, it had since been downgraded to a low-tier military outpost where unidentified signals were captured, archived, and largely forgotten. It was the kind of place few wanted to be assigned to, too far from Earth, too isolated, and sometimes far too quiet for one's sanity. But Lieutenant Callan Rourke didn't mind. He liked the silence. In truth, he needed it. A survivor of the brutal campaign against the Taro Star Pirates, Callan was a man who carried shadows within but showed none on the surface. Silence was his shield, his method of coping with memories too dark to speak of. That's why, on that particular night, when the soft ping echoed through the comms, signaling the arrival of an ancient plasma burst transmission, Callan didn't react immediately. He assumed it was a glitch in the system, just another false alarm, like countless times before. But this time was different. The data stream that arrived was flickering, chaotic, transmitting from a deep energy layer of frequency band only ancient or primitive systems could access. The auto-decryption protocols couldn't interpret it, but Callan could. His sister had once been a xenolinguist at the Interstellar Peace Research Institute. She had taught him to read fragments of the old codes back before her station was erased by the swarm. Callan's fingers trembled as they hovered over the screen, decoding each fragmented wave. Then, slowly, a voice emerged. Female, distant, crystal clear. It carried a tone no AI could replicate, a purity that felt real. "We are Valari. Please come, if any hope remains." Callan froze. His breath caught in his throat. And in that moment, years of suppressed memories shattered open inside him. He remembered how his sister used to describe the Valari. "They don't speak with voices, Callan. They sing with their hearts through light." He remembered the story how the Valari had cured the Red Plague that once ravaged acid-dwelling species. He remembered the grief when he learned that the swarm had dropped hundreds of gravitational warheads on a research facility, a non-combat site, completely defenseless, destroyed without warning. Callan jolted up from his seat. Orders flowed from him like lightning. Every emergency protocol flared to life. Gaia Outpost had just one purpose now: transmit this signal back to Earth as fast as possible. To Earth Central Command. Signal code PLM-A10. Origin point, Lytheria Sector. Content, Species Valari report incoming attack by Khelar Swarm. Recommend threat evaluation per Interstellar Life Preservation Accord. Article 7. But Callan didn't stop there. Suggested priority: Omega 0. Valari possess no defensive capabilities, but hold level 10 biological knowledge assets. Immediate assessment required. Situation: critical. The outpost's automated defense AI reviewed the transmission's origin, ran scenario simulations, and assessed historical data. Within 37 seconds, it flagged the signal as threat level Omega 0. Emergency alliance review required within 30 minutes. Elsewhere in the silent station, Callan made his way toward his private quarters. He didn't enter right away. Instead, he stood before the doorway, eyes lingering on an old photograph taped near the entry panel. A young woman with short brown hair and keen, intelligent eyes smiled amidst a field of glowing purple flowers. Lyra Rourke, interstellar linguist, alien research station. Callan touched the photo gently. "You always believed there were species that existed only to heal," he murmured, "and I wasn't there in time. But this time, it would be different. If Earth responded, if they actually chose to act, then Callan Rourke wouldn't just be a silent witness. He would be the first to move." Buried beneath Gaia Outpost's deepest layer was an ancient system, rarely accessed and never discussed. The off-world defense relay code name, Black Comet Protocol. It had been used only once, during the Meteoric War, and then sealed for being too dangerous. Callan didn't activate it. Not yet. He merely placed his hand on the biometric sensor and waited for Earth to reply. Just 4 minutes later, a calm, authoritative voice came through the main comms. "This is Earth Command Coordination Center. Transmission from Gaia Outpost 9 received. Forwarded to the Interstellar Military Alliance Command. General Ray Kellen will take over." Callan closed his eyes. "Good," he whispered. "Now it's Earth's turn." Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the galaxy, the 93 ships of the Khelar Swarm approached Lytheria's outer orbit. There were no greetings, no warnings, no signals. They moved like congealed blood, inching toward the living heart. And yet unseen, still veiled in cosmic shadow, a storm was rising behind them. A storm with a name: Drathari. The call from Earth? Deep beneath the titanium ice crust of northern Alaska, within the Central Earth Military Command District, the strategic displays suddenly shifted to red. A high-priority Omega-level alert, the designation for existential threat, had just been verified, originating from Gaia Outpost 9. In a massive, vaulted chamber where decisions had once determined the fate of entire star systems, generals, scientists, and politicians gathered in tense silence. The air felt thick as if the whole planet was holding its breath. At the center stood General Ray Kellen, still as a monolith. Her face was etched with decades of warfare from the lunar belt to the Jove front. Her steel gray eyes commanded attention without ever needing to raise her voice. A young officer approached, handing her a data board. "Confirmed from Gaia Outpost, ma'am. The Valari are under attack by the Swarm. Threat level: total extinction. Protected asset. Class: 10 biological archive. No military capability." Kellen nodded, curt and calm. "How many swarm ships?" 93. Fully armed. Bioreactive hull plating. Main fleet en route to Lytheria at Tier 3 cruise velocity. She turned toward the Allied Operations Council. "What do we have nearby?" A heavy silence settled. Then, a military advisor responded. "Only the Blue Storm fleet, stationed at Sentinel Station 5, on the edge of the Enceladus cluster. Estimated jump distance: 6 hours from Lytheria, 36 warships. Special Operations Unit Spectre is embedded." A politician spoke up, voice cold and calculating. "That number isn't enough. We're talking about a 3-to-1 disadvantage. If we send them, we risk the entire fleet and we set a precedent that Earth will respond to any plea for help." Kellen turned sharply, her gaze cut like ice. "You're saying we should abandon a peaceful species of healers who hold no weapons, who have saved millions of lives, including ours, because of precedent?" Silence. She moved to the command table, and tapped the control interface. Holographic images emerged, entire planets scorched to ash, their life signatures erased following swarm incursions. Maps marked with black voids where biological archives used to exist. And finally, an image of a young Earth girl receiving a cure for red blood syndrome thanks to Valari medicine. 1 year ago, Kellen said quietly, my daughter was one of those patients. If not for the Valari, I would not be standing here. Her voice dropped, steady and deep. We owe them not out of politics, but out of conscience. Meanwhile, aboard Sentinel Station 5, commander of the Blue Storm Fleet, Colonel Orion Solis, was running high-gravity combat drills with his Special Forces team. When the call from Earth came through, he didn't flinch. Born in the irradiated wastelands of old Earth, Solis had grown up knowing that survival came before strategy, but honor came before all. He pulled up the strategic star map, eyes narrowing on Lytheria's orbital vectors. Valari, he muttered. They are the ones who heal, and we are the scars that never close. Without delay, he issued the order. Fleet-wide Alert Condition 1. Prepare jump engines. Set course for Lytheria. Operation Codename, Stormvow. A young officer hesitated. Sir, are we really going to confront 93 swarm ships with just 36 of ours? Solis smiled, calm and unshaken. The swarm has numbers, but we carry something they will never understand. Earth didn't forge us to run. It taught us to endure and to rise, to defend those who cannot. Back on Earth, the Allied Council voted. The result? Unanimous approval. General Kellen approached the command console, tapping 3 times Earth's ancient military gesture to authorize interstellar warfare deployment. Transmit to all stations. Earth has decided. Initiate Phase 1 of Operation Stormvow. A synthetic female voice echoed through the command center, the voice of Earth's Strategic Command AI. Blue Storm Fleet, preparing for quantum jump in 23 minutes. Engagement Protocol, Unrestricted Combat Authorization. Primary objective, defend Valari biostructures at all costs. In that instant, across the galaxy, from commercial hubs to forgotten frontiers, the message spread like wildfire. Earth is on the move. And in the darkness of space, 6 jump hours from Lytheria, 36 warships lit up in sequence, each bearing the silver triangle insignia of humanity. Quantum drives rumbled like distant thunder. Aboard the command ship Verdict of Dawn, Colonel Orion Solis gazed into the star-strewn abyss. No one asked us to do this, he told his crew quietly, but no one can stop us from doing what's right. Light in the dusk, Lytheria was entering its twilight cycle. But this time, the golden hour did not carry the peace it had delivered millions of times before. From the ground, the Valari could see dark specks drifting silently across the sky. The warships of the Khelar Swarm had reached the upper thermosphere. They did not broadcast signals. They sent no ultimatum. They didn't need to. They had come simply to take. In the central chamber of the biological data tower, Chief Healer Ira Vallis stood still before the luminous interface. Data from orbital sensors painted a grim trajectory. Swarm ships were spreading in orbital rings, executing an ancient tactic of full encirclement before planetary assault. Time until contact? She asked, her voice steady but softer than usual. Her young assistant Aisel responded after a long silent pause. 9 minutes and 32 seconds. Assuming they don't accelerate. A quiet hush fell over the chamber. No one moved. No one knew what to do. They had never needed to learn how to survive a war. Evacuation? A medical officer offered hesitantly. Era shook her head. Evacuate to where? This is the only world we have. And this library isn't just data. It's part of us. She ascended the elevated command platform, a place reserved only for highest emergency states. Her voice echoed through every crystal tower. I know you are afraid. So am I. But what we guard here is not just information. It is hope for millions of generations yet to be born. If we vanish today and lock every door behind us, the universe will lose something that can never be replaced. So, if this is the final time that light will shine, we must let it shine brilliantly, not fade in fear. All across the towers, Valari stood upright. Their inner bodies began to glow a soft silver bioluminescence unique to their kind. The lights merged into one collective halo, like a full moon rising inside a storm. Far above them, in the cold stillness of space, the quantum engines of Earth's Blue Storm fleet ignited like newborn stars. On board the command bridge of the Verdict of Dawn, Colonel Orion Solus monitored the incoming telemetry. "Distance to Lytheria?" he asked. "4 minutes of quantum jump remaining, sir," the radar officer replied. "Swarm has locked down low orbit completely." Solus stared at the tactical map. On one side, 93 red icons, swarm vessels. On the other, 36 blew his own ships. A disparity that any strategist would call suicidal. But Solus didn't blink. "Prepare heat shields. We'll burn like meteors when we pierce Lytheria's atmosphere. But we're going in, no matter what it takes." Back on Lytheria, the outer lights of the medical towers were powered down in an attempt to reduce visual targeting from orbit. Still, from the planet's surface, Valari could make out shadows, the massive silhouettes of swarm ships drifting above them, like sharks circling a wounded starfish. Era stood at the uppermost observation deck. Her heartbeat was slow, but deliberately a form of biofocus only high-level Valari could sustain. She knew she didn't have much time left. Then it happened. A sudden streak of blue light cut through the sky, like a gash in the fabric of reality. "Look!" Azel shouted from below. Another followed, then another, then dozens. Flaming trails of sapphire tore through the atmosphere, falling like a rain of stars across night's curtain. Every Valari lifted their gaze. They didn't know what these things were, but they sensed something profound. The swarm always arrived with darkness, but these new arrivals were made of light. On the Verdict of Dawn, the communications array locked onto a plasma frequency one from the surface. Solus gave the order. "Open the channel." Era's voice came through, fragmented by static, but unmistakably real. "Who is coming?" We have nothing to offer but our light. But if you can hear this, please know we are still alive." Solus closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered the children saved by Valari remedies. He remembered his own niece born without lungs, kept alive by a living biosynthetic graft derived from Lytherian code. He opened his eyes and pressed the reply button. His voice was low, steady, resolute. "Era Valis. This is Colonel Orion Solus, commander of the Blue Storm Fleet of Earth. We're not here to take. We're here to help you hold the line." Down on the surface of Lytheria, every transmitter tower flared back to life, glowing like beacons in the dark. The storm was still coming, but this time, the storm brought hope. And as the streaks of blue flame broke through the clouds, the Valari knew without needing translation or confirmation. Between light and shadow, there are always those who choose to stand at the edge. They come from a world forged in hardship, but their hearts know how to protect what is most beauty. Those who come from death. As the streaks of blue flame pierced through Lytheria's upper atmosphere, it was as if the sky itself had torn open. The entire planet looked up. No one had ever seen a meteor storm like this before. Not dazzling like fireworks, not slow like falling stars, but cold, sharp, and unmistakably intentional. One Valari whispered, "They must be angels." But Era Valis, standing atop the observation spire, slowly shook her head. "Not angels. They are Drathra born from the womb of death itself. But today, they fight for the light." High above, in the thin edge of Lytheria's atmosphere, the Blue Storm fleet fanned out like iron wings, descending at speeds 40 times the speed of sound. No cloaking, no evasive maneuvers. This was a declaration. On board the Verdict of Dawn, Colonel Orion Solus gripped the sides of his command chair as the G-force crushed against his ribs. His pressure-resistant armor groaned under the stress. His bones ached, but he didn't flinch. "Drop to Stratum 3. Deploy in crescent formation. We form a wall between the Valari and the swarm. Nothing gets past us, not a single one." On the fringe of the atmosphere, the swarm reacted instantly. They didn't yet know who was coming, but they could smell danger. Several warships reoriented, launching plasma spears into the projected descent paths of the human vessels. Each beam of violet fire was a weapon that had obliterated fleets before. Silent, merciless, precise. But swarm weapons were designed for conventional enemies, not for those who came from death. The Drathari ships didn't dodge, they absorbed. Their hulls, made of earth-forged titangent carbide, bent the plasma, split it, or let it sizzle uselessly across their reinforced frames. What once incinerated cruisers now vanished into engineered silence. On the ground, the Valari saw what no one had ever prepared them for: war. But for the first time, they were not the victims. Aesol, standing beside Era, trembled as he watched the sky burn. They're not stopping. Era nodded softly, because for them, this isn't a mission. It's a vow. When the first Drathari ship, the Iron Widow, landed, the ground shook. But it didn't shatter. Instead, its landing gear braced, and the hull opened like the gates of a fortress. From its belly poured the warriors of Spectre Unit, each of them nearly 2 meters tall, clad in black-silver armor as thick as tank plating, their faces hidden behind dark visors, glowing with the red shimmer of combat HUDs. They did not talk much. They acted. Before the swarm could even launch infantry from their motherships, Spectre Unit had already secured 4 strategic positions around the biological data tower, each site reinforced with mobile gravity walls, pulse-reflective turrets, and bio-ID safeguards to ensure no Valari life would be harmed. At one tactical node, Lieutenant Kai Thorne, Spectre's field commander, opened comms to Solus. "Position secured, sir. Preparing for first swarm ground wave." "Colonel, I have to say this feels like the fight we were born for." Back on the Verdict of Dawn, Solus stood in the command bridge. Officers moved like lightning across panels, streams of data pouring down displays. "Swarms adjusting formation, trying to flank us from Lytheria's dark side," reported the radar officer. Solus gave a thin smile. "Good, the more the better. We'll crush the head of this serpent right here." He pointed to the command screen, to the largest swarm vessel, Vortha Kell, its bioreactor pulsing like the heart of a monster. "Concentrate fire on that one. If its head falls, the body will scatter." In orbit, the battle erupted like colliding moons. But Drathari didn't just fight. They moved like dancers in a ballet of annihilation. The warship Ashclaw flipped 180 degrees in 3-dimensional space, firing gravity torpedoes into the soft underbelly of a swarm destroyer. Twilight's Edge used auxiliary thrusters to breach enemy lines, clearing a path for 3 smaller crafts to stab into the mother fleet like surgical knives. Every strike, every maneuver, every blow carried the same unspoken message: we do not fight for glory. We fight for those who have never held a weapon. Back on the ground, Era Valis stepped into the central square, where Spectre soldiers were raising the final defense line. Though Kai Thorne's armor masked his face, she felt his eyes on her the moment they stood face to face. She asked just one word: "Why?" Kai lifted a gauntlet to his helmet. With a soft hiss, he removed it. Beneath the armor was a human faceless sweat, soaked, lined by war, a long scar tracing from his left ear to his jawline. But in his eyes, peace. "Because I was a child once. A child who couldn't breathe. And the Valari saved me with a strand of code and the light in their hearts." He looked around at the towers, the people, the coming war. "Now it's my turn to protect the place that gave me life. No one touches the light. Not while Earth still stands." The solar circle battle. While the surface of Lytheria trembled with cannon blasts and roaring engines, a battle of planetary scale had erupted above in the vacuum of high orbit. But it wasn't fought with numbers, it was fought with tactics. The swarm, half machine, half insectoid abominations, commanded their ships like ants tracing energy-based pheromone trails. Their hive mind networks moved as a single organism hit the left, and the response would strike from the right. But what they couldn't calculate, what no algorithm could anticipate, was this: Humanity was born of chaos, and that chaos forged genius. Inside the strategic command chamber aboard the Verdict of Dawn, Colonel Orion Solas issued a command no one expected. "Initiate Operation Solar Circle," he ordered, calm but absolute. "Draw them toward Lytheria's sun, then lead them around it." The officers blinked in confusion. "Toward the sun? But sir, its surface exceeds 6,0 Kelvin. If we get too close, we'll—" Solas cut them off. "Except us. Because we're Drethari. We were born on a planet of flame." The Drethari fleet began a retreat maneuver, so it appeared. They pulled away from Lytheria's orbit, seeming to flee. The swarm reacted immediately. Believing they had pushed the enemy back, they followed in pursuit, unaware they were being lured toward Helion Prime, the young and volatile star of the planetary system. At that distance, standard heat shields would ignite in less than 7 seconds. The swarm knew that, and they believed no one would be insane enough to attempt it. But madness was humanity's secret weapon. Leading the charge was the Ash Claw. Its hull began to glow under the sheer radiance of Helion Prime. Panels of titanium blazed orange, like molten steel. Warning sirens screamed throughout the ship, but not a single crew member flinched or left their station. In the cockpit, pilot Illyra Vance stared into the solar inferno like one gazes upon the face of a god. This is the light the swarm has never known, the light we call home. Once the swarm ships were close enough, the Drethari executed the maneuver. They accelerated sharply, using Helion Prime's gravity as a slingshot. Whipping around the sun's curvature, they launched themselves behind the swarm formation, moving at 8 times standard combat speed. The effect was immediate and devastating. The swarm's linear neural logic, perfect for slow enemies, became their undoing. They couldn't adapt. They couldn't recalculate in time. Their fleet descended into disarray. The offensive began. The Twilight's Edge fired a gravity cannon through the central mass of 3 swarm ships piercing their course. They exploded in brilliant violet bursts, each one cascading into the next like collapsing stars. The Hammerfall unleashed superconducting battle drones. They latched onto swarm vessels like parasites and detonated from within, scrambling their artificial neurocores. Cut off from hive synchronization, swarm ships drifted, fell, collided like insects with no mind left to guide them. From a distance, aboard the Verdict of Dawn, the command vessel locked onto Vortha Kel, the swarm's central node, their queen ship. Solas gave the final order: fire reverse, polarity neutron cannons, target, central brain core. We end this now. 3 white lances ripped across the darkness, brighter than even the sun behind them. There was no sound, no detonation, just light. Then absolute stillness. Vortha Kel disintegrated, and with it, the neural command structure of the swarm. The remaining ships spasmed, lost in code. Some spun aimlessly. Some drifted into gravitational wells. Some self-destructed, not because they were hit but because they no longer knew how to exist without orders. Back on Lytheria, the Volari didn't understand orbital warfare. They couldn't see the sun. They couldn't hear the commands. They knew nothing of slingshot maneuvers or neutron cores, but they saw ashes fall from the sky. Tiny flakes of violet gray drifted down from the upper atmosphere. The dust of swarm ships burned to nothing. No longer dangerous, no longer alive, only remnants. Aerovalis stepped out from the data tower. The wind carried the ash like snow, but this snow was warm. No one ever believed that light could be born from a world of death, she said quietly. But today, I saw it with my own eyes. Inside the command bridge of the Verdict of Dawn, Solas stood motionless. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He exhaled. A long, heavy breath, as if an entire generation's weight had just lifted from his shoulders. Transmit to the entire fleet, he said. Victory confirmed. But do not celebrate. What we just defended is worth more than all our lives. Flesh and bone in zero gravity. Inside Omega-1, the primary biological research station orbiting Lytheria, emergency mode had been triggered. All artificial gravity systems were offline after a swarm-ion barrage struck the station's grav regulators. The facility had turned into a floating prism in space where support beams, conduits, and medical equipment drifted like debris in a dream. Only this dream stank of blood and scorched ozone. Spectre Unit, led by Lieutenant Kai Thorne, had been dispatched to reclaim Omega-1 before the swarm could fully purge its vaults that contain the genetic blueprints of over 10 endangered species. Inside the drop chamber, Thorne performed a final armor check, each click of the suit echoing in the hull. In zero gravity, the average human couldn't move with any real precision, but Spectre Unit had been trained to do the impossible. "Remember the training on the Martian dark orbit field?" he said evenly, as his boots locked into the launch cradle. "Low oxygen, 1/4 gravity, and enemies in every hallway. That was for this. This is the test." His squad nodded in silence. They weren't afraid. They were used to absurdity. They were born from worlds where hell was a daily trial and war in zero gravity. Just another rhythm in the song. The hatch opened. There was no sound, only the cold whisper of vacuum and the outlines of swarm infiltrators already attaching relay arms to the station's data core. Kai motioned once. No words. They surged forward like wolves through a sheet of ice. Flesh and bone met zero gravity, and something strange happened. In this environment, a punch from a Marine in full Earth core armor could send a 200-kilogram swarm flying 20 meters backwards. A single thrust of the legs could propel them across entire corridors, living projectiles slicing through darkness. Zero gravity didn't slow them down. It gave them freedom. Kai kicked off a wall, twisted midair, rotated upside down, and brought his blade clean across the swarm's neck-purple blood trailing behind him in spiraling arcs. He didn't pause. Behind him, Private Lyra Cho fired an electromagnetic round through the arm of a swarm that had nearly breached the core node. The shot kept going through 3 more bodies, each clustered like insects on a hive. It looked like a ballet of death. Where no one walked, they swam through shadow, silent, precise, and unforgiving. A swarm turned, fired. The plasma bolt missed wide, but it scorched the armor of Private Makoro, melting his shoulder plate. He didn't stop. He didn't need footing to fight. He only needed a reason. "There are more lives inside these data vaults," he roared, "than in every wasted year of my youth combined." He launched forward like a missile, slamming into the swarm Solgera comet, colliding with a meteor. In just 7 minutes, Spectre Unit had cleared the primary data level. Systems flickered back to life, thanks to technician Sal Vren, who rewired a plasma core junction while suspended upside down in mid-air. "Data network rebooting," Sal called. "The Valari have hope again." Just as the team began stabilizing the zone, a tremor echoed through the facility's underbelly. A map blinked to life. A crushing-class swarm breacher ship had punctured the subdeck and was deploying boarding teams. Kai looked down the hallway where floor tiles cracked and buckled. He gripped the overhead beam, then opened comms. "This will be our last jump in space. No gravity, no physics, just us, and the reason we're here." The final battle inside Omega-1 did not resemble any known form of combat. The Drathari soldiers didn't stand. They jumped, spun, slid, used their bodies, their bone sand, their armor like symphonic weapons. Swarm optics couldn't track them. Even automated cameras struggled. They moved like myths. And when it was over, when the last swarm fell, only one sound remained: the breathing of the survivors. Heavy, shaking, but still alive. They floated like weary gods among shattered walls. Lieutenant Kai Thorne, armor cracked and bloodstained, clung to a support beam near the ceiling. Beneath him, the core of Omega-1 remained intact. 4 Valari scientists stared up at him, eyes wide with awe. He looked down at them. "Don't look at me like I'm a hero," he said between gasps. "I'm just a man, born of pain, and taught how to fight for things more beautiful than myself." Dawn of the Alliance. 3 days after the battle, the skies above Lytheria no longer carried the scent of smoke. There were no more explosions, no more purple ash falling like mournful rain. In its place, the twin suns of the binary system began to cast their light Agangentol rays like the first dawn of a new era. At the Central Valari Plaza once, a sanctuary for meditation and prayer, a new structure had been raised. A round table, sculpted from living crystal. There were no flags, no weapons emblems, only a soft blue-white light hovering above its center, pulsing in sync with the planetary biosynaptic grid, a symbol of rebirth. On either side of the table stood two species, two worlds, but on this day, they were no longer strangers. They were allies. Chief Healer, Era Valis, her inner light glowing, faint but steady beneath her translucent skin, stood upright, not as a political figure, not as a representative of a race, but as someone who had seen the brink of oblivion and the miracle of renewal. Opposite her stood Colonel Orion Solas, his uniform still marked by the smoke of battle. A fresh wound crossed his shoulder stitched, raw but his eyes still held steel, not the steel of a soldier, the steel of a guardian. Era spoke first. We have no legal codex to draft a treaty. We have no council to vote on binding law. But we do have the will to live. And thanks to you, that will remains. She bowed her head slightly, traditional Valari gesture of gratitude. We propose not a treaty between two species, but a covenant between life and those who protect it. Orion's voice responded deep and weathered like thunder crossing ancient skies. We did not come for glory. We came because my daughter once survived, thanks to Valari cellular therapy, and because millions of others have as well. Earth will never forget. We accept the covenant, not as protectors above you, but as those who stand beside you. If light requires a sword to stand with it, then we, the Drathari, are that sword. All around the plaza, the crowd of Valari began to glow softly, a pulse in sync, a biological chorus, an ancient expression, like a song sung from the marrow. They weren't smiling with mouths, they were smiling with light. And thus, the Lytherian Accord was formed, not signed in ink, but by the founding of a new installation, the Guardian Nexus, where every light finds its reason to endure. Within the Nexus, architecture fused Valari living crystal with Earth's artificial gravity frameworks. Medical bays operated next to tactical war rooms. Human doctors learned to perceive inner light. Valari scholars studied strategic mapping. No commands, no rulers, only learning, only coexistence. On level 5 of the Nexus, Lieutenant Kai Thorny Soldier, who had fought in zero gravity at Omega 1, entered a special classroom. Before him stood 12 young Valari, their skin glow vibrating with nervous energy. "We don't want to hold weapons," said one small boy, his voice like soft chimes. "We just want to know, if the time ever comes to protect a life, how not to fall apart." Kai nodded slowly. "I won't teach you how to fight. I'll teach you how to stand when your light is tested. That's the lesson death taught me." News of the Lytherian victory spread across the star. 3 other species, once under threat from the swarm, transmitted signals to the Guardian Nexus. They didn't ask for aid. They asked for the chance to learn how to stand. In her energy journal, Era wrote, "Not every world has light, but thanks to Earth, now every fragile world can have hope." Aboard the Verdict of Dawn, Orion Solas stood on the command bridge, looking out at the sea of stars. Beside him stood Era, preparing for her first voyage to Earth. "Do you think we can learn to fight like you?" she asked. Orion gave a rare smile. "I don't think you need to learn how to fight. You only need to keep your light alive. And if anyone dares to extinguish it, they'll have to go through us first." Children Without Borders. 6 weeks after the Guardian Nexus became operational, Lytheria entered a new age zone, no longer defined by combat protocols, orbital incursions, or emergency briefings that danced on the edge of extinction. In the place where battles were once fought, now stood a playground, not for generals, but for children. Across soft meadows regenerated by Valari biotech, children from 2 worlds chased each other through the light gravity fields, as if war had never existed. Human kids, with strong legs and boundless energy, sprinted in freedom beneath dual suns. Valari children glowed like living fireflies, their luminous skin pulsing and their large eyes shimmering with curiosity. One such child from Earth Sam Rourke, age 10, nephew of Lieutenant Callan Rourkewas, in the midst of a joyful chase. His playmate, Leo, a small Valari whose skin was as delicate as mist and whose eyes shimmered like molten silver. Sam shrieked with laughter as Leo tagged him with a spark of light from his palm. "Hey, that's cheating!" Sam shouted, breathless. Leo tilted his head, his voice sounding like soft electronic music. "I only lit up. That's not cheating." They both burst into laughter. Far above, on a glass balcony of the Guardian Nexus, Chief Healer Era Valis and Colonel Orion Solus stood watching. Era didn't blink, her gaze steady, captivated by the vivid motion and innocent sound below a kind of life she had once thought would never return to Lytheria. "I used to think interspecies harmony was a philosophical fantasy," Era said quietly. "But now I see. It can start with something as simple as a children's game." Solus, ever stoic, gave a small nod. "Victory wasn't the destruction of the swarm," he said. "It's that the next generation won't have to learn how to carry a weapon." On the third floor of the Nexus, Kai Thorne led a class of mixed students, both human and Velari, teaching how to regulate heart rhythm under different gravitational fields. None of them were required to attend. They came out of curiosity drawn not to a soldier, but to a survivor. A shy Valari child raised a hand. "Mr. Kai, were you ever afraid when you fought?" Kai paused, then slowly lowered himself to sit at eye level. "Yes, terrified. But I learned something. Fear doesn't mean weakness. It means there's something left inside you, worth protecting." In a research corridor nearby, Asa Lance Era's assistant, now an interspecies science liaison, guided a group of Earth teens in listening to Valari biosonic frequencies using tactile sensors. A 14-year-old girl from Earth named Naomi touched one of the crystals, her eyes widening. It's vibrating like a heartbeat." Aesel smiled. "No, Naomi, that is a heartbeat." In the biogarden, Sam and Leo were planting native Lytherian flora together. Every time Leo raised his hand, the soil responded, tiny shoots sprouting, as if it could feel the living energy flowing from him. Sam crouched nearby, sweating and unsteady. The light gravity made him wobble each time he bent forward. "I think I'm better at kicking balls than planting flowers." Leo handed him a blossom with a glowing core. "Then I'll plant, and you'll hold. This flower only blooms next to a heartbeat. You're its heart now." Sam grinned, holding the glowing bloom like it was treasure. That night, in the central plaza, a ceremony took place to mark the first generation of connection. There were no flags, no military band. Just the light from Valari hearts pulsing like star sand, small flames carried in the hands of Earth's children. Era Valis stepped onto the stage, the first time she spoke publicly to both species at once. "When we sent out our distress signal, we never expected an answer. But you, Kamino, as rescuers, but as those who remembered that light, must be protected. And now, you've sown something in Lytherian soil, seeds that will never again fall into darkness. Because we have learned, friendship does not come from shared blood. It comes from a shared desire to protect what is more beautiful than ourselves." Above them, the night sky came alive. Valari satellites aligned in orbit, projecting a constellation into the sky, two intertwining strands of DNA enveloping the symbol of Earth. Its name, Nova Cordis, the new heart. As the ceremony wound down, Orion and Era stood side by side one final time before the human delegation prepared to return to Earth Prime. Era looked out across the children now, singing in a chorus of blended tongues. "Do you think they'll keep this light?" she asked. Orion watched, his eyes locked on the future. "If we never teach them to fear it, they'll keep it forever. A legacy among the stars." 12 months after the Battle of Lytheria, the skies above the planet had changed completely. There were no more swarm ships, no more emergency alarms piercing the silence. In their place, a lattice of peace satellites now shimmered, constructed from Valari, living crystal, and stabilized with Earth's anti-gravity cores. A structure like this had never existed in any known galaxy. They called it the Bridge of Life, where healing signals could travel through space like light piercing the night. At the heart of the Guardian Nexus, Era Valis entered the Grand Hall, where she had once signed the covenant with Orion Solus. She was no longer a commander, no longer a wartime leader. She had chosen a different role, Keeper of Legacy. Today, she carried a new crystal still, unnamed, destined for the living core of the Nexus. Inside it, every single data record Valari had gathered over 30 years. No encryption, no copies withheld. She gave everything. If light exists only in the hands of one species, it remains a fragile torch, easily extinguished. But if we share it, it becomes a sun. On Earth Prime, Colonel Orion Solus was invited to stand on the Hall of Honora place reserved for war heroes. He declined all medals. Instead, he sent a single message across the star systems. I am no hero. I'm simply someone who remembered that humanity wasn't born to conquer, but to protect. That message was translated into 72 languages, broadcast even to frontier colonies that had never heard the name Valari. Within a year, 42 species transmitted requests to the Guardian Nexus, not for protection, but to learn, to understand how to preserve what they once believed impossible, trust in others. From a planet once on the brink of annihilation, Lytheria became the capital of the first non-military alliance in galactic history, the Council of Guardians. On the distant ice world Uvan 9, a ready child was cured of genetic disintegration using Earth Valari regenerative therapy. On a pilgrimage planet called Saleum, biosignal beacons transmitted from the Nexus-guided wandering ships without the need for navigation systems. And aboard a small interstellar shuttle, Sam Rourke and Leo, now first-year students at the Interstellar University, were preparing for their very first joint thesis presentation, Post-War Peace Structures, a Model for Tomorrow. Sam nudged Leo and grinned. Do you ever think all this started with a battle? Leo gazed through the shuttle's viewport toward the millions of stars gleaming beyond. No, I think it started with the signal that someone chose to answer. Back at the Nexus, deep within the main archive vault, Era approached the final chamber, sealed and untouched until now. She placed her hand on its surface and whispered, "This is the story we will leave behind." The interface activated. File. Done. Lit. Title. The Defense of Lytheria. Annotation. This is not a story about war. It is a story about why humans chose to stand amid war. Not for gain. Not for power, but simply so that the light would not go out. In the Eastern Biogarden, Kai Thorne sat beneath a canopy of living foliage, joined by fellow Spectre veterans. No armor, no weapons, just scar sand, quiet laughter. A small Valari child ran up, thrusting a crumpled drawing into Kai's hands. Two towering figures, hand in hand, shielding a flame from the wind. "This is you," the child said. "How we see you." Kai stared at it for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Not bad, but we weren't just walls. We were trees, so the light could grow." On the final night of the Nexus's first year, Era and Orion stood together atop the observatory. No longer leaders, no longer symbols, just two souls who had walked through death and returned with light. Era asked, "Do you think the stars will remember us?" Orion didn't look away from the heavens. "Maybe not, but those who carry the light from this place to the next, they will. And that is enough, because that is the legacy among the stars."